Okay, it's 3 minutes after our starting time. We start now. Welcome to our first episode of the IDTA webcast series. Still people coming in. Today we welcome Kai Garrels as the first speaker in this series. He takes us on a digital journey today, how to get started with your AAS-based digital twin. So he's giving us an introduction how to get started with the technology of the asset administration shell. I have prepared a slide to introduce Kai Garrels. Kai Garrels is from ABB Electrification, Head of Standardization and Industry Relations. He's also active in platform industry 4.0 since many years. Since 2017, he's head of working group reference architecture, standards and standardization. So basically from the group where the asset administration shell was developed. And he's a founding member of IDTA. Today, he's gonna present his first talk in this series. Afterwards, after his talk, we're going to have the chance to answer questions. So if you have any questions, you can put your questions into the questions and answer tab. You find it on the right corner, but above corner. And please ask your questions. And now I take over to Kai Garrels. The stage is yours.
Okay, thanks, Mike, for the invitation. And thanks for the nice topic. Let me share my screen. If you could tell me if it works.
Looks good.
Okay, good. So, begin your digital journey today. That was headline number 1. And the headline number 2 is how to cook a delicious digital twin with only 3 ingredients. So we will cover both of this. First, digital journey. So if we are looking into platform industry 4.0, we have a certain focus, which is the exchange of information along the value chain. So here you see a value chain simplified. You have a supplier, you have an OEM manufacturer, and you have an end user. Each of these value chain partners has their own data worlds. They maybe have their own cloud already out there. And our question is, how do you exchange information between these data worlds? And we are discussing not so much about what is happening inside these boxes, for example, on the shop floor. If you look into the literature, you will find that these automation questions are called Industry 3.0. So that is the 3rd step, and we are discussing the 4th step. If you start a digital journey in your company, there is a simple model to look at, and that is to look at 3 areas that you can deal with. One is the digitalization of the interface to the customer. So how do you interact with your customers? How does a customer find your offering? How do customers decide? What is the customer really interested in? What are they really buying? What can you learn about the customer? What trends can you derive? So that's the first area to look at. The second area here on the right side is the digitalization of your offering. So are there digital substitute products that are relevant? We all know the famous Kodak example, from film to digital. Maybe already in the market, some expectations have arisen that customers expect certain digital content to come with the product. You could think about digital services that you combine with your product. Fitness trackers is an example of the consumer world. You can look at payment models, pay-per-use or something like that. And you could also think about what information can the product or the solution deliver back to me. And the 3rd column is the column where we are already very good. That is the automation and digitalization of internal processes. So where do you find printers and piles of papers? Where do you have manual interventions, people confirming suggestions from the ERP and so on? So that is something that is, I would say, already very well known. These three key areas determine the success of your company. So what you have to do is you need to create customer value and you need to share customer value between you and the customer. And if we talk about value, it is not only money, it is also other values. For example, nowadays, sustainability aspects are a value that is often looked at, or also the buildup of know-how. So here you see some of the value drivers. Interface to the customer determines your sales effectiveness, your growth potential, threats from intermediaries, how do you generate your cash. Value from the offering is, of course, how will the offering work in the future? What is the substitution risks and so forth? And of course, in the internal processes, it is all productivity and efficiency questions. The areas are linked. You cannot only look at one of them, because if you have a very nice digital interface to the customer and people are ordering digitally, you need to have a digital order process in your internal processes and so on. And you can also understand that if you're not able of having a digital offering, maybe the whole story doesn't make too much sense. And you might also be stuck in the functionality of your product. So these areas are linked and you need to look at them all. Let's do a hard switch to the asset administration shell. So in industry, when we talk about industry, we are mainly talking about things or assets. So it's stuff that we produce, stuff that we sell, stuff that we purchase. So, and we call that asset in Industry 4.0. So it's machines, their components, supply materials, parts, products, but also documents, for example, could be an asset, contracts, orders. We all put them into the assets category. And we have the asset and we have information around the asset. And the organization of the information we call the asset administration shell. So if this is the asset, and here we have the information, we could call this a digital twin, and that's exactly what it is. So the asset administration shell is the digital twin for Industry 4.0. It covers the entire life cycle of the asset. We will look a little bit at the identification. The administration shell ensures controlled access. So the people that shall have access can have access. And the information that you have can be from the asset or about the asset. So if you imagine a robot, there is information that comes from the robot, but there's also information that comes from other systems like the ERP system that contains the maintenance log for the robot. So how do we cook our digital twins with only 3 ingredients? Let's look at these ingredients. So this is the list of ingredients. First ingredients is identifiers or identification. People in Germany might know Erika Mustermann. She is the virtual person around the ID cards and passports. So let's assume she's a real person. And she has an identifier. In a criminal context, this would be, for example, a fingerprint. And Erika has an ID card, so something that organizes additional information around her. So if you look at this, it already looks a bit like an AAS. So we have here the ID card that includes some information about her, and the ID card has its own identifier. So 2 things to learn here. One is Erika is not her digital passport, and the identifiers must be different because it's different things. In Industry 4.0, we do exactly the same thing. So we have the asset. We give it a fingerprint in form of a QR code, which unambiguously identifies this one individual asset. And we have the asset administration shell, and it gets an identifier. You notice that these identifiers, they look like internet addresses, and they are internet addresses. So if you follow this internet address, we can now play this deliver product data game. So you scan the QR code of the product with your normal smartphone camera app. The ID there takes you to a server at the product manufacturer, and you receive information from the asset administration shell of that manufacturer. So this is how one simple use case looks like delivering product data. Second ingredient, submodel and the asset administration shell. So now we are coming to the core functionality, basically. In Industry 4.0, we look at certain use cases. For example, there is a use case that deals with simulation. There is a use case which is dealing with documentation. And the information that is needed for these use cases is put into groups, and we call these groups submodels for certain reasons. For example, if you look at the submodel nameplate, it is a digital model of what you find on the nameplate of a product. So it's like a digital model, and as it is not complete, we call it a submodel. So a submodel only looks at a special use case, and the collection of all relevant use cases is then called the asset administration shell. And of course, we are not using folders and this box there. We are using digital exchange methods. Third ingredient, semantics. So how do we know what the information means that is inside the submodel? So if my wife says to me, the Jaguar is in the garage, I might be either surprised and positively surprised, or I might be scared. Because if the context is not clear, the term Jaguar can mean two different things. How do we avoid this ambiguity? There is a well-known method, so-called semiotic triangle, where you describe communication between a sender and a receiver, and they are using symbols like the symbol Jaguar. And the symbol is related to a physical abstract or object, and this is where we are now clarifying if it is a large cat or a nice car. And the symbol can be looked up in a dictionary which contains a description that is human readable, so you know what we are talking about. How does that? There's an analogy here. If I talk to mechanical engineers and I tell them it's an M8, they immediately know what is M8. And if an electrical engineer sees green, yellow, he also knows that's a protective ground. And this predefined meaning of things is exactly what we are doing here. Now, these dictionaries are not for people. We have machines or systems talking to each other. So actually what we need is a dictionary human to machine. So one side of the dictionary must be machine readable. And this is an example here stolen from our standardization friends. You have here something called a Berliner, and to clarify which Berliner is meant, there is a description, human readable, and sometimes you have a picture to make clear what it is, and then machine readable, you have this code, and if a machine or a system sees this code, it means it's a Berliner filled with jam. Maybe you know E-class, that is the dictionary that we are using. It's a very comprehensive dictionary. And hoopsala. And if you look at one of the product types that are described there, you can see that the product type has a coded identifier, and each of the properties that could then go into a submodel would also have a machine-readable numbers. So, for example, the American wire gauge, which goes into the connectors here, that would be this symbol. You would know which cable can go there. Always included is cybersecurity. So I did not mention it as a separate ingredient. I only had 3 ingredients. So it's like the pan that you're using to cook. It's always there. We are using some well-known and well-established principles of cybersecurity. Let's start from the right side here. Let's assume a business partner wants to access the asset administration shell. He would log into an identity provider, which both parties have agreed upon. He would receive a token. The token is used to log into the system of the plant operator in this example. And based on the token, that partner is identified, and the access to certain asset administration shells, submodels, or submodel elements is based upon the rights that this business partner has. And also the communication connections are encrypted, so it's not possible for a man in the middle to intercept this communication. So that is the 3 or 4 ingredients that we have. Going back to the digital journey. So when you start that journey, you might experience some surprises along your way. So I've seen many companies where digital projects should be started, and we have these defensive arguments. We have no time, we have no idea what to do, we have not the competence to do it, or the competence is only in a silo, for example, in the IT department. There are lots of misunderstandings and fear about cybersecurity, data protection, loss of know-how. There is, of course, contractual or legal uncertainties. It might be that the experts who know the digital game have no clue about the customers. And last but not least, you have organizational barriers and kingdoms. So you have to look at all of this before you start your journey and get some motivation into the organization to get started. Then there might be some challenges. So one challenge that we have noticed in several projects is you need to find the de facto power centers in the company. So the company does not work always like the org chart says. There might be very powerful, influential people that can block or influence or promote certain ideas. So you need to find these and convince them and get them started. Then if you get started, you will find many different ideas and visions and suggestions what should be done. And the thing is, you need to spend a lot of time to harmonize these visions, make a common image where you want to go, build a common understanding. You will end up with some common jargon. What is a solution? What is a digital service? And so on. This is very important. You will find some organizational questions. So should the digital thing be a profit center? Should it be a horizontal function? Should it only sit in sales or in service? So you need to answer some organizational questions. And of course, you need to build the competence. And for many product companies in the industrial space, the cloud know-how is not so widely spread. So it is useful to get external help or to hire some people who are experienced also with the technical stuff. You will find tricky situations around legal questions, contracts, service level agreements that maybe you have never discussed before. Also, the contracts might be international if your partner sits in the UK and there is no common legal space anymore with the British friends. You will have some questions about who will benefit from the results of what you are doing. And you also have to watch out that technology is not a self-purpose. If you leave engineers alone with a cloud solution, they will do a lot of interesting things, but maybe they will not do in a focused way what you want them to do. So this is also an effect that we have seen a couple of times. So you got started, stuff is running, you get your first invoice from the cloud service provider, and you will find that this is much more than you had expected. So that's something that can happen. You will need to convince your people maybe that you have to run 24/7, so 3 shifts, because customers are all around the world and they want to, I don't know, let's say charge their car also in Canada. Maybe the customer doesn't buy the way you thought he would buy. And of course, mistakes are made. Maybe the software that does the remote update doesn't work in the first quite large batch of products and you cannot update them. So this is stuff that could happen to you on your journey. So why does it start again from scratch here? I don't know. This is where I wanted to get. So Mike, Q&A.
So we do not have any questions in the questions and answers field. Are there any questions? You can put on your camera if you like. Please be aware that our recording is still running. If you want to take ask a question anonymously, you can do it on the questions and answers tab on the top right. There's a question by Christian. Oh, it's in the chat. I have to change. Is the AAS usually hosted only at the OEM? Is the question.
Yeah, that's a very good question. So where is the AAS sitting, or where is the data? And basically, it is so that we say the deployment questions have to be answered, so we don't really know. We think that the product manufacturers, and ABB also is a product manufacturers, they will run data servers that implement the AAS. So in order to get the product information, you would get in touch with an ABB server to get information via an asset administration shell. Then if you have, for example, an engineering partner, he might ask you to put your information into a common repository of AASs, because there he will do his engineering work. And maybe in the final stage, the whole collection of engineered and product AAS will go to the operator, because he needs to have it in his own house. So the deployment questions are very much depending on the use case.
Can I ask specifically?
Mm-hmm.
In my use case, I have an edge computer at the end customer side, and it's in a critical infrastructure, so the customer doesn't want to give the data away such easy. So he likes to control which data he likes to give us and which not.
Yes.
And we need some time series data to get some results over crazy algorithms and machine learning and so on. And then we were thinking about how to introduce there the asset administration shell, if it's maybe needed to implement it on both sides, and if these administration shells then communicate with each other, if this also can be a possibility.
Yes, exactly. So we call this replication between asset administration shells. I don't think I have the picture at hand, but normally you would not let people access directly into your automation, for example, or to your edges. So you can implement an AAS server in an edge, replicate that content to maybe something in your intranet, replicate that out to a third party who would offer it then to the business partner. That is possible, and each stage you can restrict what information is allowed to get in and out. So yes, you can do that. You have to think about 1 or 2 stages how the information could flow. But it's totally possible and has been implemented.
Okay.
Maybe the question is a bit too technical, and I recommend the session with Andreas Orzelski, which is, I think, the 4th session or so. He could guide you with very deep technical know-how through the question.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Christian. Are there any other questions? You can write, you can raise your hand and ask directly.
Okay, I can start. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I put a question in within the topic, but I don't know, maybe you don't see that. The question is following. You are talking about a digital twin with these 3 ingredients, but according to my understanding of the digital twin term, comprises also the behaviors of the system. How do you address these topics, like the rules, the logic, the decision logic, constraints, or whatever? Because you already spoke about the semantics, but the semantics that you showed us was just to distinguish the meaning of not the meaning, but just to distinguish the 2 topics.
Yeah, I was maybe a bit too fast with that. So it is hidden in the submodels. So, for example, you might have an asset where you don't really need the asset, you can just simulate it. So the complete behavior of the asset could be simulated in a submodel simulation. And inside the submodel, you can have properties, but we are using the word property in a very wide way. So you can invoke methods, you can send out events, you can read and write data collections, and so on.
But they are not addressed in the asset, in the Verwaltungsschall in German, in the AAS, but they are also within the submodels, and the notation. It's not necessarily to be addressed in the administration asset shell, right?
It is important. Yes, the functionality is in the submodel, but the context about what the submodel is talking about is hidden in the asset administration shell. So the submodel is here, but you need the asset administration shell to know what asset you are talking about.
Yeah.
So
okay.
the information flow would be, okay, I want to talk to this robot. You find the asset information shell. It would give you an endpoint for the submodel for this specific asset.
I understand. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, a very good question. Some organizations have started to implement it. They say, okay, we only need the submodels, and then they came back asking, but where do we get the context, which asset we are talking about? And that's because they left the asset administration shell away. And we say that the submodel is a part of the asset administration shell.
Yeah, the question is, where is the difference or the border between the descriptive and the procedural descriptions?
They are all in the submodels. So really the AAS only gives the context. It is this box, which could be an empty box at the beginning, and then you fill it up with submodels that are descriptive, behavioral, simulation, whatever.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
So there's one other question from Mohammed. Does IDTA provide support in implementing mentioned use cases such as digital nameplate?
You can answer that better than me.
Into my direction. We do not offer a service like we are a service provider, but you find all these help within our working groups. So if you join IDTA, if you join in the working groups, you will find a lot of other members who have to find solutions for the same question or found solutions, especially to the digital nameplate. If you look at our website, you find an implementation, for example, from company AAS, which is quite impressive on this topic. So if you join the network, and the easiest way is, of course, the membership. There are different ways, as our talk today, to find people to talk to about these implementations.
Yeah, and what you did not mention is that you also have some software and consulting firms who are specializing on the topic. So if you like one of those companies, they can set up a project with you to take you through the process. You find them also on the IDTA website.
Right. You can also contact me. I can give you some hints to who to contact. It's already after 5, so we are through with the official time. If there are any questions, of course, you can raise the question. We won't leave until the last question is asked. If there are no questions, I would like to raise the attention to the next talks in the upcoming weeks. So every second week there will be a talk. We're going to have a shift around the SPS show. The next talk will be by Roland Dunker about the use case digital nameplate. So Mohammed, if you join the next time, you have a really expert with Roland Dunker from company Estal on this topic. If you are registered, and you are because you are here in this call, you're going to get an invitation to the next talks. So you will receive something in your inbox. You will find the recording of this session on our online platform. We also will provide the link to this online platform. So thank you, Kai. Thank you all for participating on our first talk. Hopefully we see on the 13th of October.